Very excited to bring up the filmmakers behind Inside Out 2, starting with director Kelsey Mann, producer Mark Nielsen, Amy Poehler, who plays Joy, screenwriter Mendel Poe, and screenwriter Dave Holstein, and composer Andrea Datzman. So I guess Kelsey and Mark, I just want to start at the beginning. At what point, when do the internal discussions start at Pixar about creating a sequel to Inside Out? Does it happen pretty fast on the heels of the first one? Does it take a while? And what are the very first steps that you take toward making this thing?
Yeah, Pete Docter, it was about 9 years between the two films. And when Pete made the first film, he didn't really have an intention to make another one. But along the way, so many people approached him through the years just to talk about how much that first film meant to them and how much it impacted them and made them think differently about sadness. And it really got him thinking, maybe the world wants another Inside Out, right? And that's Kelsey, I think, where he called you.
Yeah. I had, it's all started from, we get all of our schedules on our phones, and I had a meeting pop up. And it was Pete, Jim, and Kelsey. Jim's our president, Pete is the director on the first film, and he's the chief creative officer. I'm like, what is this meeting? I had no idea what it was.
The good news, you're getting fired.
Yeah, I'm like, it's funny, I made a movie about anxiety for a reason. She got to work. She saw that. She's like, what is this thing? She immediately started to go, what are the possibilities of what this meeting could be? But it ended up being not the worst meeting in the world, but the best. Because Pete talked a lot about what Mark was talking about. And he said to me, I think there might be another story there, and I think you'd be a good person to go off and think of, see if there is something worth telling. And what I love about Pixar and what I love about Pete is that, and he even told that to me in the moment, he's like, if we don't find something that we get excited about, we won't make it. And so it always has to come from a place of story and needing having a good reason to tell another story.
Were you at all apprehensive about, given how great the first one is and how much you have to live up to and how much people love it? I mean, was that creating anxiety?
Did I feel the pressure? Did I feel a little pressure following up one of people's favorite, not only animated movies of all time, but just movies of all time? A little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, no. And I felt the same way because I loved that movie. And I worked at I didn't work, Mark was on the original film, but I didn't work on the first film. I was at the studio. So I would go and watch the screening and give notes. But really, I got to see the film from your guys' perspective, which is an audience member, and it was kind of really helpful for me as a director because I could, all I'm trying to do is get myself in your guys' shoes, and what do I want from that perspective, and I got to make it happen, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, Amy, you were an integral part of the first movie, and I'm curious, before we talk about Inside Out 2, I was wondering, when you were making the first one, did you know what you had, or were you shocked by the overwhelming response to it when it came out?
Well, it was a huge learning curve because it was like my first experience with Pixar, which is its own beautiful, magical machine. And to watch how they work was really something. So, but I think I did think it was great. I really did. I think from the minute I started working on it, I thought, this is so beautiful and interesting and deeply funny. And so I think I knew it was very special. I was honestly, the first film, I was just worried about my performance, just hoping it was good, hoping people wouldn't be annoyed by it. Is it coming across like that? I was a little bit more inside my inside. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, talk a little bit about that whole experience of being in Pixar, because that's something I find fascinating. Whenever I talk to anybody who's been involved with Pixar, it does seem like such a different way of making movies. And what surprised you about it, and what did you like about it?
Well, Well, I feel like the people on the stage could speak to it better than I can, but I'll just say what I was blown away by was the amount of work to get it right. Just super, like whole. There's tons of movies that are gone that were just so much trying stuff and screening stuff and losing stuff and rewriting and re-recording over and over and over again. Such diligent work, patient work with really talented people. Because I think when you work with talented people, there is certainly a sense of, I was coming on a film. It wasn't like Pixar was like, gee, I wonder if we know how to make a good movie. I mean, they had made 25 before Inside Out or something. So it was like, it's hard to be like, we know how to make a good movie. But what I learned is that people truly don't rest on their laurels. Their laurels are very busy.
Well, you're talking about just, all the different things they try out. I mean, that kind of leads me to a question for Meg and Dave, which is, I was wondering watching this movie, how many blind alleys you had to go down or things you had to try that didn't make it in here, because it's such a finely crafted jewel, but it's so complicated. And it feels effortless if you're an audience member watching it. It's just like this great ride, but I'm sure that making it look effortless probably takes a ton of work.
Yeah, I mean, when Kelsey and I started that first screening, there's only 2 shots left. We were talking about it in the back. From that first movie, there's 2 shots. The rest of it's all gone because you iterate and iterate and iterate, and you put it up, get notes, you go again, you start over. And what I learned, because I was new to Pixar too for the first one, is that I suddenly realized one day, I'm in a building full of artists who have been drawing in sketchbooks their whole life. So when they want you to write a scene, it's much more like sketch it out. Okay, that sketch doesn't go, close that book, go to the next book, sketch it out. And as a writer, you can get so protective of your pages and but these are good. What if I can never write good pages again? But their mindset is very much more go again, sketch. So it's an incredibly deeply iterative process, and then add to that 3 storylines moving at the same time that all have to speak to each other. So from a screenplay standpoint, it's 3-dimensional chess.
And structurally, I'll ask to kind of comment to a crescendo at the same time. When other writers ask me what it's like to write in Pixar, I always say, so you can write a screenplay, cool. Have you ever written one inside a dishwasher? While it's running? Because you're just always running from, you're editing, you're shooting, you're writing, you're iterating. I wrote, I think, 800 pages on the movie. Whoever designed the campus was good at practical jokes, because there's a walking track in a loop, and all day it's just writers on different movies muttering to themselves.
We actually didn't build that. That's made from the writers.
But you also, as a writer, get to have amazing experiences. Like on the first one, we all went to New York and we sat with Amy and we just read through the script and watched you start to throw. And I don't know if you remember this, but the whole in the first movie, The Circle of Sadness, that came from you just throwing a line. And I was like, oh my God, The Circle of Sadness, that's so good. So it's this incredible high of being able to work with people who are geniuses at what they do, and all the artists, but then you also end up in your room alone having to write that scene. And I don't know, could you get this done in 2 hours?
I think I wrote one of the most emotional scenes in the movie in the back of a car driving to the airport. On my laptop. Yeah.
Well, one of the great innovations in this one is the new emotions like anxiety, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you zeroed in on the new emotions, and were there emotions that you maybe tried out that didn't work, or maybe too confusing or too elaborate?
Well, we try a lot, right, Kelsey? My favorite was Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude.
He shows up in his lederhosen. He tried to get in the first movie and he got cut out, and then I brought him back for the second movie and he still got cut out. But we had Shame was in the movie as one of our antagonists, working with anxiety.
Yeah, that's still, I feel like the feeling of that character is still in the movie, because it was always built around this pitch of the feeling of not being good enough.
Yeah.
And it's really at the center of it. We're like, well, that's shame. That's where it began. That's where we started talking about it. Let's put that character in the movie. and it was way too dark and not fun to watch at all. You know,
I loved it.
You want to make
I loved it, but it was too dark.
Yeah, I wanted to make a movie that was not only very emotionally moving, but I wanted to make a movie that was really fun, and a movie that you would want to watch again. Because that's my jam. Those are my favorite movies. You know, there's some movies where you're like, that was great. You want to see it again? No, never again. Those are great, but I don't want to make those movies. And so we wanted to keep it so that it was a movie that we want to watch again.
And we couldn't just go, let's have new emotions. We had to go to Pete Docter and prove.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Mark? We had to say, okay, where have they been? Why were they down there? Why are they coming now? Did they get to drive down there? And we created a little big giant button and an old TV set, and Anxiety could put a magnifying glass up and go, look, I drove, and there was a dot of Anxiety. Like, we had to do the whole thing, which all gets cut out. I mean, they were drawn, it was in for a long time.
That's what people should take away, is that at Pixar you have to go to Pete's office to get approval for your emotions.
Mark, do you have something you looked at?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, you're right. Pete was not really feeling the idea of adding new emotions to this movie at the beginning. You guys really had to spend like a month selling him on that and really showing him that they deserved to be in the film. And then you could use
where
them
were they in
the
Mom's head and Dad's head in the first movie? Like, you had to go through all the rules. And why would it be good for Riley in the story?
And it came from, like, I made a list of what I wanted as an audience member. Okay, I'm going, like, one ticket for Inside Out 2. And I sit down with my popcorn. What do I want? What am I hoping for? And I made a list of that. I'm like, I want that puberty alarm to go off. You set it up. I'll be mad if you don't do something with it. I'll be like, hey, you brought this up, not me. Like, finish it. And the other one was new emotions. I'm like, I want new emotions to show up, and I feel like that's what the audience would want. And Pete was just like, there's a lot of emotions. We picked 5 for a reason, and we had more, So he cautioned us, and also wanted to make sure the logic made sense. But I'm like, it's like doing a Toy Story movie, not adding new toys. Like, you're gonna want that, and so we had to sell it. So we eventually came up with, like, my analogy was the Starship Enterprise. You've got the bridge, but there's all kinds of other little places in the ship, and we're like, oh, we were just down in engineering. And now we're coming up, and that sold them on it. But we had to stop. At one point, you and I were like, we have to stop and figure this out. And we had to stop working on the outline to convince Pete that we could do this.
Well, so new emotions means new musical motifs and themes that you need. So Andrew, talk a little bit about that, about composing music for, say, Anxiety.
There was a lot to cover with different new emotions. And Anxiety was such a versatile character too. I mean, we're not presenting ourselves with a complete antagonist here. This is also our protagonist, because all of it is Riley. It's such a beautiful message that she wants to protect her with. So that was a great challenge to capture what anxiety feels like in your body and turn that into music, and capturing the alarm sense of it, to get your attention, and you wanted to feel like, hey. Did you listen to me? It became very easy to then work that. Take that stuck on alarm and turn it into a march, or turn it into a sort of rhythm that you can get that fades into the background, just like Anxiety. Like, you stop noticing it, but you get that consistent message. One of my favorite new emotions, not new characters to write for, was Riley's sense of self. Actually, you've got so many characters in her mind. And that is the one that's the essence of Riley. And that was really precious to get to create that musical icon of.
Yeah, I mean, well, I really, I love the score. I mean, I was talking with Kelsey yesterday, and I think, it's one of my favorite scores ever, and it's one of the things I think makes the movie work so well. And Kelsey, you were talking about the fact that you come into this as a director, you don't necessarily speak the vocabulary of a composer or music. So how do you communicate with Andrea to collaborate on this great score?
Yeah, you're working with so many people when you do an animated movies. I mean, you guys saw the credits. There's so many people that make these movies. And it's sometimes intimidating because there's so many brilliant people at the studio, and half of them I have no idea how they do what they do. And I remember Pete talking to me and saying, you don't, as a director, you don't need to be an expert at everyone's department and what they do. You don't need to tell them how to do their job. You just need to tell them what the scene needs emotionally. And so when I came to, I definitely didn't have the music theory and knowledge. I'm a huge film score like that. I love film score, but I don't know the language of it and vocabulary. And Pete's like, don't worry about that. All you have to do is speak emotionally what the scene needs. That you can do, and that's your job. That's like, you're like, oh, I'm not feeling the dread here in this moment. I want to feel a little more worried for Riley right there at that moment, right there. And then Andrea works with her entire team is amazing. We just had lunch with them today, and they're incredible. And then they all like take my thought, and then they like figure out what to do, and then they communicate in the language that I cannot like even repeat now. It's just amazing.
It's a lot of communication that I took as well was within Kelsey emotes. His body language gives you a lot, I think, and that's such a gift because then your words do not necessarily need to carry as much. You can say it needs to be more, and get a lot from that. So that was a real gift. With a stoic director, you don't get that extra level.
I jump up on the mixing stage and roll around.
Amy, what was your experience like working with Kelsey, and what do you look for from a director when you're making a movie like this?
You make a really good point that Kelsey has a ton of energy, and it can get really, the hours can actually get kind of long in the booth where you start to be thinking like, is this good? And Joy is such an engine, she has to keep it up. She really has to keep it up. There'd be a couple scenes where it'd be like, Joy is sad, and I'd be like, okay, good, Joy gets to sit down. Because you cannot record Joy sitting down. But Kelsey would match that energy, would really honestly keep me going a lot of times, because I knew more in the second film that so much of the stuff we were trying honestly wasn't going to make it, and that's tough. It's tough as an actor. The first time around, you're like, the second time around, you're like, oh no, is this going to make it? But what is so wonderful about voice acting is you really have to swing for the fences a lot. You have to you can't be embarrassed, you have to make big choices, and Joy is just this giant person, little person, giant person. And so Kelsey was just really good at truly keeping me energized, because he was energized, and it felt like almost like a training session sometimes of like, let's keep going, you're almost there, 20 more, 18 more, 15 more, but the enthusiasm that he and everyone here had for the project all the time was very contagious and really helped. I think it helped everyone's performance.
And there's this point that's come up a few times about all the iterations the movie goes through. And Mark, I'm curious, like, in terms of, as you're going through these iterations, how are you gauging what's working and what's not? Like, who are you showing this movie to?
Yeah, we made like 9 full versions of this film over a 4-year period. And these are full 90-minute versions you can sit in the theater and watch. And they started 3.5 years ago, where it's storyboarded, and you cut the storyboards together with sound and music, and then you simulate the movie-going experience. We sit there, we invite the crew, we invite what we call Pixar's Brain Trust, which is like the creative leadership, a lot of directors and writers from other shows. You show it to them, and then we sit with them for a couple hours and have a note session in one of the conference rooms. And that's where you learn what's playing and what's not, what's resonating with people and what's not. And then we go back to Meg and Dave, and they rewrite the whole thing.
It's really funny when you're in one of those and they start by going, "This has gone backwards."
My stomach just went.
Well, also, Mark, don't forget Riley's crew, which was another group that watched the film every time, which was our focus group of a dozen...
nine teenage girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, we created a focus group of teenage girls from across the country to give us feedback on the film, and whether it felt believable, relatable, the dialogue, the situations, what Riley's going through, what she's feeling. And we showed them all 9 versions. Every 4 months we'd meet with them and have a little 1-hour brain trust session over Zoom with these girls that were invaluable, I think, to keeping us on track.
Is there anything that you remember, that feedback from, specific feedback that you got that changed anything or added anything?
A lot of it was, they would give us a barometer as to what was really working, you know, and they're like, we really feel that. One thing that was surprising is, you know, this film is, you know, there's a lot of sports in it, more so than the first film, and a lot of them, you know, a lot of them are at the age of Riley, and it's where it starts to switch, where, you know, when you're young, you automatically make the team, and then you have to try out, you know, it gets more competitive. And all of them really responded to Riley, you know, not only, you know, accepting and loving who she is, but actually going back out on the ice and playing the sport that she loves with a sense of love for the game. And they had a lot of them said that I've lost that with volleyball or with soccer. And it just gave them a lot of joy to see them do that, you know. And there was a whole angle that I hadn't even anticipated. They were fantastic. And gave such great notes. They were incredible.
I wanted to ask Dave and Meg, like, how their notes compared to like studio executives.
Well, I don't know if I won't say that, but working in this business. But you know, they were so prepared. What I loved about them is they were so prepared. They would come with handwritten notes, and they would stack their papers, right? And they'd be ready to go. And there were always the ones that would go first because they were chomping at the bits, and there were always the quiet ones in the back who were a little bit shy. But they, you know, try to get them to talk to, and they would want to talk, and just even watching them on the screen too would help us remember what it was like to be that age.
Yeah, they also told us what worked, which was different than the executives. And, but for me, I think also just, I think a big writing challenge in this movie was understanding what stakes mean in this world. Because they're, you know, in a regular film, you go to the place of life and death stakes. What does that mean? Oh, they're in a tree, or they're going to fall. And I think the more we talk to the actual teenagers, for me, what clicked was, when you're that age, you know, a 3-day hockey camp can mean the rest of your life. You know, and so building backwards from that great panic attack scene, you know, so much structurally in this film had to come from how do you set up a situation where she is without any support system, where she has no cell phone, she has no parents, she has none of the things you need in that moment to help yourself. And also the added stress of, well, she scored 3 goals, I've got to score 3 goals. We just kept silently adding those elements so that when you get to that climax, structurally, it hopefully feels triumphant that everything is sort of clicking at that moment. But from the perspective of a teenager, what's life and death, not from, you know...
I don't know if I ever shared this with you. The first time I saw the film, I was sitting next to my friend's 5-year-old, and when Riley decides to go into the locked room, he got scared. Which I think was such a testament to the work you all did, because the 5-year-old brain was like, "Ooh, that's bad. That's a bad thing to do." You know, it was like, that's the wrong thing to do. And I don't like when Riley does that. Like, that's scary. It was so cool to watch that happen in real time, and, you know, and so nuanced. And the social pressure. Social pressure is so big at that age, and we forget, to your point, how big a deal it is.
We had a moment there that was probably rightfully cut, but that where in that moment when she's trying to decide should she do that thing, anxiety actually cut one of her beliefs that was stopping her from doing it. that also like hit probably too hard, you know, because it felt like she was doing a bad thing intentionally. But
And in the notebook it says not ready yet.
yeah, not really.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that not enough is so powerful, and how it's, you know, again, you have to build that strand so it can be like that voice, that screaming voice in her head at the end.
Such a good sentence though, because a good coach notices that. Not ready yet isn't so condemning when you're older, but when you're young, it's just
And it also just activates the character too, because it's not saying no.
Yes.
It's saying, here's a judgment, but maybe I could fix it if I was perfect.
Yes.
You know, and,
Yeah.
Which spins anxiety.
yeah.
You know, like, what does that mean? Does that make me anything? That.
Yes.
The sense of physical danger that I first felt, where I was like, oh, I'm screwed on this movie. It was just in the back seat of the car. Riley sitting there. Just that is physical danger inside.
When your friends say that they're going to a different school.
Yes, absolutely. As she absorbs that kind of
She looks out the window.
and says she's fine. But that is very important moment of understanding that danger starts in your brain at that moment. As a, you know, it's not necessarily some big trigger outside. It's just tiny conversation.
Isn't this movie so good? I'm sorry. It's so good. It's wild.
Meg mentioned earlier our first, Mark's talking about the 9 screenings, and Meg was talking about the first screening, the 2 shots, if you're curious, like 2 shots right in the beginning to the end. One was the puberty alarm, because I wanted that to go off. So there's a shot of it going, woo! that stayed the same in every version. But the second one is one that's near and dear to my heart, which is the last shot in the movie, which is Riley looking at herself in the mirror. It was all, I think that's why these movies are really hard, but we always knew what we were going for at the end. And that is so helpful. And we knew that, but it was still freaking hard. This all came from like, I was scanning some of my pictures. I needed to like get a digital copy of all my hard copy photos, and I noticed something about one of my birthday pictures. I saw him even though I was 5 years old, and I kind of stopped in my tracks looking at this photo because I'm so happy in this photo. I had the biggest grin on my face. And I've got my cake there, it's Batman and Robin cake, and I got my whole family around me, and I'm so happy. And what was important about that photo is not just some random day, it's my birthday. And your birthday it's all about celebrating who you are. And by that smile on my face, I could tell 1,000% in on doing that. And then I turned 8 and 11 and then 13. And I'm just sitting there, staring at my cake, wishing I was anywhere but there. I hated being sung happy birthday to at that age. I'm a little bit better at it, and I'm like, and Meg, you're always good at like digging deep of like, why are you feeling that? And taking me into the lava, as you say. I'm like, why am I feeling that? And it's all about, at that age you become incredibly self-conscious. And I didn't like everyone looking at me. I didn't like the attention. And if I go really, really deep, if I go deep, deep down, I was thinking, am I really worth all this celebrating? Like if I go really deep, that's what the movie, that's what I felt at that time. And that's what I wanted to make a movie about, is dealing with that feeling of not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy. And I wanted to end the movie with that image. I wanted people to be able to see this film and go home and look at themselves in the mirror and love what they see, both inside and out. And so that's kind of what this is all built around.
I think in a way that kind of answers the question that came to me when Amy was talking about the 5-year-old, and I was thinking, the greatness of this movie is that it can have that effect on a 5-year-old. If you're Riley's age, I'm sure it's speaking to you in a certain way. If you're my age, it's speaking to you in a different way. And that's something that's kind of a hallmark of a lot of Pixar movies, I think. And I'm just curious, I guess this could be for the writers or it could be for you or Mark, how do you guys calibrate that, or is it just kind of intuitive? I mean, I think about this all the time, because I have a 7-year-old
son, and I know the movie he's watching is more of a Looney Tunes cartoon at that age. He's not getting some of the headier stuff. He's going to see a different film. And how special is that? That when he's a teenager, when he's an adult, when he's a dad, like it's a different movie every time. There are not a lot of films out there that can do that. I don't think it's something we think about consciously as we're writing it. We're just trying to write the most honest, universal movie.
That's the really interesting thing about art is that you can have that heady idea of, oh my gosh, we have to appeal to all the different age groups, but you're not going to write anything if you're worrying about that and thinking about that. Like we're just going to stop. Versus, Kelsey, why did you feel that way when you were 12? Let's talk about that day, and like just getting really, really specific about that day, what it felt like, where was it in your body, and let that dreamer start to, and that unconscious start to say, well, I guess I didn't feel worth anything. Well, what is that? It wasn't enough. And then you go, oh. And you're trying to get down to the human condition. You know that whether you're 5 or 100, whatever culture you're in, you have felt that as a human being, and you're just always trying to dig down into that. And yes, you're trying to have fun and do all the other stuff and tell a story in 3 different layers and all kinds of things. There's a lot of balls in the air. But you constantly go back to the rudder of your director emotionally. What is this about for him, and why are we doing it? And if you can get deep enough, we can all feel it. So then we can write it, we can write music, we can act, because we're all human beings and we feel that. So it's an odd thing, the more specific you get, the more universal it goes.
Yeah, well, I think, Kelsey, you really achieved your goal here, I think, of making a movie that rewards repeat viewings. I've seen it several times, and I think, I just see more stuff every time that I love. So I really appreciate all of you taking the time to come out here and talk to me about it. It's a great movie. I agree with Amy. It's really nice.